Hi, my name is Jenny Davis. I'm speaking to you here from Juba in South Sudan. We're in the capital of the world's youngest nation, and we're right across the other side of the world in the heart of East Central Africa. I have been here for the past 2 months serving with Mission Aviation Fellowship, MAF, and my role as a communications officer has just brought me halfway across the world to really try and understand what God is doing here at this time. I've had lots of contact from friends and family back home over the last few weeks. It's been great to hear and connect with people. And one thing that a lot of people have asked me is, how it feels to be here at the moment. And for me, one of the things I'm able to say is that actually some of the words I received and the calling that I had to do this in the first place was really kind of summarised by a couple of really key scriptures, which reassured me that God was in this, because as soon as the COVID crisis started to raise its head, those exact same scriptures came back in a different context, but they spoke of the same thing, that I'm resting in God's protection and His power and under His wings. So there's those beautiful words in Psalm 91, which have meant a lot to me. My calling to come here started a year ago, a long time before this crisis. Because of that, I feel confident that God is ordering my steps, and He's already gone ahead of where I am today.
So Jenny, tell me a little bit about the landscape in South Sudan at the moment. Is COVID-19 your main kind of concern and fear for the people that you're connected with?
Yeah, so COVID-19 has now reached us here in South Sudan. Our first cases were confirmed at the beginning of April. Actually, it was the Easter week when the first cases were confirmed here. It is definitely a concern, because looking at the sort of patterns of the spread worldwide, it's definitely one of the biggest challenges facing all countries at the moment. South Sudan is very vulnerable in terms of the resources available to us here with healthcare, and it's a country that's literally just in the last few months and over the last year come out of quite a bitter civil war. So they are under-resourced in many areas, including the healthcare system. So what that's meant is that COVID has reached us here. The headlines have given us a bit of a heads up on how to prepare for it, but they're very much looking at how to tackle COVID in the context where preparedness is everything, prevention is everything here, because if the pandemic reaches us in a significant way, then the people here will really struggle.
You did a blog for Premier Christianity magazine, and within that you wrote about, in the past, that knives, other things were kind of the biggest weapon in South Sudan, and right now it looks like soap is going to be the most important thing you can use.
Yeah, soap and water are two of the key weapons that we have in a country that is so used to kind of resolving its problems through military means and through violence, and that's a really interesting place for us to be, I think. But it's the preparedness, making sure that people are well equipped with the knowledge and understanding to know that if you take some very simple measures, then this can be we can beat this using other means. I've been talking this week with partners who are other mission partners who are doing a brilliant job of getting the message out there. One of our organisations that you'll be aware of in the UK, called SIL, is taken on the job of translating the COVID posters, the ones that we see everywhere here, the government mandated posters, into as many of the country's languages as possible, and they're just so committed to getting the message out that I think they've done 28 of the country's 60 languages so far. And then we have another partner who's funding the printing of those and helping with the distribution. And it's amazing to see how when you kind of look at what's needed and think about the best ways to reach people, it's the simple things. It's the soap and the water. It's the understanding how the virus is spread, and meeting the needs for basic PPE, for the continuing of providing of healthcare in places where they're providing it already, but keeping those supplies coming, and that's where MAF can really help.
I wanted to ask you about that. I wanted to ask you about MAF at this time, and to tell me a little bit about, I mean, I'd never heard of it. Forgive me, I'd never heard of it before, but tell me a little bit about what it is and what your role will be. What's your role anyway, but what will your role be during this pandemic?
So Mission Aviation Fellowship, we are basically a Christian mission / humanitarian airline. We get people where they need to go. Our passengers include doctors and nutritionists and missionaries and pastors and all sorts of different humanitarian workers and people reaching out with the gospel of Christ. So we have a long history. This is a country where we did our first flights back in 1950. We flew to somewhere last week, but we flew back in 1950. And so our roots are very much, and our heart is very much in the country of South Sudan. Yes, the kind of ways that we've been helping so far, we've been able to fly in the very early weeks after COVID was first discovered here. We were able to fly test kits out to some of the regional towns so they could get those people tested, the suspect cases confirmed, or happily in this case most of them weren't confirmed. Following on from that, we did fly some rapid response teams on behalf of the government and World Health Organization as they went to carry out contact tracing. In the UK and in other countries how important that is to really look back and see where people have had contact with others, and to isolate those people and put some protocols in place that actually protect everyone. So we've been able to help with that. We've been able to help with cargo flights. We have a lot of very isolated people here in South Sudan who are doing particularly humanitarian work in very remote communities, and they are continuing to need supplies to continue with their work. About half of the population here is in what would be considered humanitarian need. So that's people that are in need of support to maintain good levels of nutrition and basic healthcare, and there's lots of organisations that are delivering those services that we help with our flights. And so, like, even in the last, today we're flying malaria medication. Last week we flew some antivirals for a clinic that was helping people with HIV/AIDS. We're able to fly foodstuffs that are sustaining some of these teams in some of the remote locations where there are displaced people and people who are in need of help. So yes, we are very much here to support people in whatever way they need with our flights. We are having the conversations, hopefully, that will mean that help reaches the people that need it. So yeah, that's our role here in South Sudan.
And with that role, are you able to share the gospel as you do that work? And I'm interested, is there a story about anybody in particular that you've met that's really kind of connected with you and hit your heart?
So one of the ways I think that we wouldn't necessarily have expected to be serving people is actually just through our base here in Juba. We've been able to host families who are coming from the field, often missionaries, but also NGO workers who have had to change their plans because they haven't been able to travel and leave the country. So we've been able to sort of host different people in our compound. And there's one in particular where there was we flew 2 passengers on a flight, and it was a medevac flight because one of the young people, a girl who's in her late teens, actually had appendicitis, and she was able to get on the last flight out of the community where she was serving with her mum and come to Juba and have the operation. And if she hadn't been able to go on that flight, then she would have had to receive healthcare in the town, which would have been much higher risk. So yeah, it's amazing just to see how all those things came together in God's timing. It was the last passenger flight. It wasn't the day after. It was yeah, something that we've been able to continue to kind of help them and support them by giving them somewhere to stay while they're in Juba, and using our facilities to kind of serve people who have just had to change their plans, that are having to deal with the uncertainty of everything, and they are there's just very much a feeling that we're all in the same boat, and yeah, we're all Christians in this together.
I wanted to ask you that. So where, as you come together, as you kind of lean on each other and you lean in to God and to His Word, can you give me some kind of examples of where you have seen God at work or providing, or where you're kind of resting your hope?
I think God is just in so much of the detail. What we do is a highly technical ministry, and it requires so much communication with our partners, with the government, with, you know, trying to get everyone to kind of on the same page so we can enable our ministry and just the day-to-day stuff that still needs to happen. So we've been praying for things like flights to get our maintenance done in Kenya, and permissions to allow certain particular types of flight to take place, and all the time we're doing that, we're sort of trusting that God is working his timing, his purposes to enable what He wants the ministry to happen. We've been doing lots of sort of flying of cargo items, and it's kind of easy to see that just provision is something in this time where it seems like such a small, humble thing, but actually it makes all of the difference for people who have got that heart to serve. Our witness is actually often relational. We pray before every flight. Our partners and our passengers know we're a Christian organisation, but it's about that serving, the servant-heartedness of just doing what's required and doing as much as we're able while we still can. So together, the whole picture comes together, and people in South Sudan who have very little have just a few of their needs met.
Jenny, I'm not going to keep you much longer because I've asked you so many questions, and thank you so much for how beautifully you've answered them, and honestly, but just one thing I wanted to ask you, so in the UK, for many different reasons, many of us will be frightened and fearful, and yet it feels to me that you're this amazing woman who's come from that relatively safe place in the UK to South Sudan, and you're very much on the front line with very little kind of medical equipment available and things for you in the way that we have here. And I'm just wondering, do you ever feel frightened? And if you do, where do you go with that?
That's a really good question. I actually don't think there's anything extraordinary about what we do here. I think there's extraordinary people everywhere, and this is what we've been called to do here in South Sudan. In the UK, people are, doing an amazing job of providing healthcare and reaching out to their neighbours and reassuring family and friends, and it's that sense that we're kind of all in this together. But I don't know. It's always a challenge when you're a Christian to find God in the midst of the storm, to kind of seek Him out, and actually to be found in Him. There's a song that that's been really kind of speaking to me over the last couple of weeks, and it's called "Dancing on the Waves," and it's just this beautiful parable of like the prodigal. It's sort of the prodigal son meets the the story of Jesus walking on the waves, and it's this combination of him coming out to seek us out and also challenging us to do that little bit more, to push into our faith that little bit more during these times of uncertainty. And I think that we're able to to get so much more from God and give so much more to him in our trust and in our worship in times that are a bit challenging. But there's nothing extraordinary about what we're doing, but we are doing what God has called us to do here, and to really honour people and encourage them. And often it's the small things actually that do that. I've been emailing back and forth with a missionary who's in a very, very remote community, and she just needed something really simple for her car. And it's been, things like that where you can say, I'm in Juba, I can go out and get what you need and put it on a flight or on a transport, and that will hit those. It's the little things. It's always the little things, and I think that's what COVID has taught us over the past few months. That sometimes it's the small things when you can't leave your house, when you're struggling with a boisterous family, or whether you're locked in on your own. It's the small things that make the difference, and that's where the witness can be.